Krista Raymer, welcome.
Hey,
Welcome back. I got new music. What do you think?
we're vibing today.
I chose it because the actual music is called Vice City. I thought that was appropriate.
Vice City.
Vice
Okay.
City. Well, Krista, every Thursday we try to connect with you for Shop Talk with Krista because you are our person that knows the most about cannabis retail. You live it, breathe it every single day. We wanted to connect to talk about that. Last Thursday, you were not with us. I apologize. We had on Boris Jordan from
You
Curaleaf.
traded me in.
Not that he's more or less important than you, but he did. They did drop earnings last week, and he had something interesting to say about what's happening in New York with this fee they want to charge the big ROs to
Yeah.
enter the adult use market. Anyway, you got bumped for Boris Jordan, so don't feel bad. You feel
Man,
bad, okay?
leave me on the sidelines. It's fine, Jay. I'll always be there for you.
He didn't get his own music, so
Well, here we
and
are.
you did. Krista, I want to talk to you. We often talk about sort of operations within a retail environment. Of course, that is important. That's you're expert at that. But the thing that you also deal with a lot is brands and what shows up in store, how it shows up in store, how to know if it's working or not. Earlier this week, in our newsletter, Cultivated, we had our insights from, like we do every week, from Lit Alerts, which showed brands that are selling the most units in New
Yeah.
York City by category and by borough. So there was some geographic difference. There was some product difference. There were some repeat folks across those boroughs, Heirloom and Dank by definition doing really well in New York City and throughout the state as well. But I wanted to ask you, because you've seen new markets, old markets, mature markets, immature markets, markets in flux, like how do brands position themselves, and how, if you are on that list now, how do you keep on that list? And if you're not on the list now, how do you break in? Because it's really hard. Like what are there sort of tried and true methods, or is it like spray and pray?
You know, I feel like you're asking a question to somebody that's like, I want to preface this and be like, I'm not a brand builder.
Right.
But I spend most of my time understanding and looking at if things are succeeding in retail stores and like what are the definitions of that. KPIs and brand building aren't everything. Like there sometimes are things that break a mold and don't show up in KPIs from a brand building exercise because a brand fundamentally usually is emotional. So you have some kind of like emotional relationship with the customer connected to that product, for example, or the brand. What I do know, though, from looking at more mature markets, like obviously coming from Canada, when we would have first met, how many brands are still in the market when we had those conversations versus today? And even when we look at, say, for example, California, Michigan, Colorado, there is a theme. Now, depending on the category, it varies, but usually a product drops into store, like if it's a new product, and it has a lifespan of somewhere between 8 and 13 weeks. And so if the product doesn't bypass or if the sales slow down somewhere in that period, it's unlikely for it to sustain sales after that kind of like 13-week period. So what does that mean? Could mean that the brand like isn't resonating with the customer. It could mean that we paid for customer acquisition either through kind of like discounts and that like it just didn't, the product isn't resonating. And so I think when you're thinking about brand building or like in a market like New York, for example, we have to take a look at when did it drop? What does the sales line look like? And sales line would need to be both a retail buyer, like where did our wholesale orders go? And also what is their sell through looking like? And I think historically as an industry, specifically if you're sitting in the seat of a brand, we've been like very concerned with how many orders, POs did we get? Like are buyers interested in the product and much less concerned about the long tail, which is did the customers purchase it? And within that, we need to be caring about is the customer repurchasing the product, not just that they bought it once. And so if they're repurchasing it, that's where it starts to show that the product exceeds kind of like that 8 to 13-week window.
Yeah, that's interesting because what you described is actually not that different than like my reference point is like a retailer like sprinting to get to the door open and then not sort of focused on what happens on day 1 through 100, right? And what you're describing is similar to a brand where there's this huge sprint to get it into stores, sell it to buyers, get it in stores, which may, and this equivalent is like the sprint, but the marathon is also critically important to get the sell-through rate, and the repurchase as important to show resonance with consumers as the initial sort of wholesale purchase from the retail buyer. And
Yeah.
so taking this example one step further, the little alerts that we posted on Tuesday showing who's winning in what borough right now in which brand category will be
Yeah.
interesting to revisit 10 and 12 weeks from now to see if they're in the same place. Although we could also go back and look too.
Yep.
What brands are winning over initially and then over time, again, to get that initial ramp up, but also are they maintaining that sell-through rate and resonating with consumers?
Yeah, and then even within a brand, you can have like a large variance of product. For example, flour is a really great, very specific. Let's talk eights for a moment. You put a number of different strains in one brand, and like, is it the strain that's resonating with the customer, the specific product, or is it the brand? Like, what is our brand promise? And like, I say this because some of these things are really cliche. Like, all I hear is like, a brand needs to be supported. Well, what does that even mean? And I think like really it is about when a product is coming into market or a new brand is coming into market, we need to be thinking about, this is how we've positioned it, but is that how our customer understands the product? And so too often, I think historically we've seen kind of like a brand be built, and we try and have a brand promise, and we become very sensitive to like adjusting the brand or adjusting the positioning of the brand. But like, if you are 20 weeks in and we aren't seeing something working, did you already lose the momentum of the opportunity to reposition the brand, whether that be the price point, whether that be the ideal customer profile? Do the bud tenders in stores understand both of those things and like how we got to something? And so price is a reflection of consumer value. It isn't necessarily something to build a brand on. It's a byproduct of the features and benefits of a product. And so, and how the customer understands the price. So it's really, brand building is really hard. I don't think as an industry we always, talk about what that means and what that looks like.
Right. And also, is what is working, and I'll put that in quotes, working the first year, is it working because it's the only thing on the shelves, which happens a
Yeah.
lot too? Is the only
Yep.
thing that can stay on the shelves, which is also
Yeah.
an important factor in new markets, or is it
Yeah.
something that you actually dug your heels in and were sustainable? Because I remember you and I did a presentation, it was probably to a partner of ours at the time, around brands
Yeah.
that were up and down in Canada, right? Like who was winning, right? Who's winning the brand battle? Um,
Yeah.
some of those are still around in terms of the companies are still around, the brands are still on shelves,
Yeah.
but some of the ones that had popped in that 1 month window we were putting together presentation are gone, like way gone, right? Like
Way gone.
they were new, they
Yeah.
could be on shelves for a month. Consumers wanted, they're popping on Reddit, and then they like dropped off. They couldn't A, fulfill orders, but B, actually do the outreach to retailers to ensure sell through. Like it is, and I assume the same thing happens in regular retail too. It may be more pronounced in cannabis in that people can't keep things on shelves because they don't have the cultivation capacity.
And people will understand the brand how they want to understand the brand. I like, so top of mind, but HBO has come back out and being like, we're going to rebrand back to HBO, which, I mean, what is it? A cycle of 5 years between going from HBO then to going to Max. We tried Max with 3 different logos, and now we're back to HBO Max. It's like the customer was like, we believe that this is HBO. Max means nothing to us. Just,
Right.
this is HBO. And so like, also, when are you willing to accept what the customer is saying? I think the customer's been trying to tell HBO that they don't want it to be called Max for
A long
a
time.
long time. I also like, if you look at the same example, people still call X Twitter.
Right.
It's like, these are really difficult things to either reposition sometimes, or the customer tells you one thing and it's like, you gotta lean in, and like listen to what the customer is saying. And so what does listening look like? I think in cannabis early days, specifically like in New York, is, do you have repurchasing rates?
Right. Right.
Like,
Did you
it
see
doesn't
also,
matter if
this
it's
is
not sustainable.
there's a rebrand. Did you see this Kind Bar? You know, the granola bars
Yeah, yeah.
redid their logo, and there's a whole video of them celebrating the logo design, and they do an
It's like
unveiling, and it's very
almost the
similar to
same.
the other,
Yeah.
right? It's like they barely changed it. They're getting ribbed on social, but like That's a brand that knows what they are. They know their promise. They resonate with consumers. Like, don't change much, right? That's, you know,
There's like the can you stay memorable?
yeah,
Like that's the other thing about brands is that people aren't reading when they are looking at shelves or like
right.
scrolling through an e-commerce site. They are scanning for relatively familiar information.
Yeah,
Kind Bars has an entire group of customers that know exactly what that product looks like.
right.
It would be difficult to just like drop an entirely new brand because it has like a cognitive dissonance, or like there is a connection there with the customer that they can quickly recall the information.
Yeah, and it is harder and more harder and maybe unique in cannabis in that you rarely see the actual product as you buy it, right? You may see a
Mhm.
logo somewhere or a dummy container or whatever, but it
Yes.
is usually on a menu, certainly through e-com or on a menu board, and you're scrolling for that actual brand. And I've seen it. You know, we have a retailer here in Canada that writes everything on a whiteboard, like, and it's so much stuff. I'm just scanning to see the words I want and
Are
know.
familiar with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and also it's like how do you think about brand building in a commodity environment? Are we in a truly commoditized world right now? Maybe not in New York, but in some more mature markets, like does the customer even care what brand it's in? Is there trust there? Like these are all questions that I ask myself. I'm not sure that I have all of the answers, but I do think that there are some indications within repurchasing behavior, like how quickly you expand a consumer base. Is it because you paid for that consumer base, or is it because it's organically happening through things like word of mouth and or repurchasing? So I think those two things are something to for sure pay attention to with brand building.
Very interesting and certainly related to what happens at ground floor retail. So we appreciate you, Krista.
Mhm.
As always, on Thursdays for Shop Talk with Krista. We'll be back next Thursday with you. We will not bump you, I promise, promise. Now that we have your own theme music, we're never gonna
We're in.
we're in. You're locked in. Krista, thanks for joining us this morning. We'll be back tomorrow for This Week in Cannabis News, powered by Dutchy. Krista, thanks so much.
Thanks, Jay.